Would you turn in your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 11, verses 20 through 22. I want to talk about hope and how hope gets us through the seasons of life. Again, Hebrews 11, pick up in verse 20. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his bones. I'm going to start with kind of a simple and a silly illustration, then I'm going to get more serious, okay? I read this week that probably nothing in the world arouses more false hopes than the first 4 hours of a diet. Pretty apropos because I finally decided to get my act together. Every winter, you go into inactivity and you eat too much. And there's a time where you have to finally get your act together, start walking again. So I have returned to walking and eating less than I should. I do not enjoy the thought of rolling out of bed early. Sometimes when it's still dark, it'll be cold, the sidewalks will be icy. I put on my sneakers and I start on my trek. And every step of the way, I pray. Because when my feet hit the floor, I just really don't want to go any farther. And then you start playing the mind games. But you just say, every step of the way, God help me. And you believe that He will. And I am looking to the day, maybe 3-4 months from now, when I will be back in shape. Haven't lost a pound yet, but that doesn't matter. It'll eventually happen. Now I know, silly illustration. So let me tell you a story that isn't so silly. Dr. Jeff Ray was professor of homiletics preaching at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary there in Fort Worth. By the way, I did a lot of my studies over there for my thesis. They had a fabulous library. But his life was etched with trouble and tragedy. In his early adult life, now think about it, because the life of a professor at a Christian school is not easy. You have to teach more courses. There's that many more lectures. There's that much more work. You're going off on the weekends and you're speaking to different churches, and that was his life. But his wife died in the early years, and so he found himself taking on all of the work burdens as well as the raising of his children on his own. And then later on, he lost a dear son, and he came to the conclusion that he just couldn't go on anymore. He quit teaching, and he quit preaching. And the wife of the seminary librarian said, "Why don't you go visit him?" And she had a scrapbook of poems. And she said, maybe these poems will help him. And so the seminary librarian left, and Dr. Ray came across this poem. I'll read it to you. I want to let go, but I won't let go. There are battles to fight by day and by night for God and the right, and I'll never let go. I want to let go, but I won't let go. I'm sick, 'tis true, worried and blue, and worn through and through, but I won't let go. I want to let go, but I won't let go. I will never yield. What? Lie down on the field and surrender my shield? No, I'll never let go. I want to let go, but I won't let go. May this be my song, mid legions of wrong. O God, keep me strong, that I may never let go. With that, he regained his hope in the Lord, that God would keep him and bring him through that season in life. What was he to not let go of? He said, well, God, of course. But I would like to be a little more specific. The God of hope. God has given us an eternal hope, but he also gives us a present hope. We believe that he will bring us through the difficult seasons of life. We have his good and precious promises. We know that he will never leave us nor forsake us. And by faith, when going through trials, we believe God will get us through. We see a future day that God will bring us to. Faith, by definition, is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And so each of these people in this chapter become an illustration of that kind of faith. With eyes on the future fulfillment of the promise, they plowed through the things of life. Now, I'd like to look at three ways of faith. Faith when the future affects, or where the future affects the present. First principle, faith accepts God's plan regardless of how it looks, or God's will, regardless of how things look in life. The first illustration is that of Isaac's blessings on both Jacob and Esau. And if the story is new to you, or if you have a vague memory of it, I'll just tell it to you briefly. Isaac was the son of Abraham. Abraham received the promise, and then Abraham passed that promise on to his son Isaac. Isaac then had two sons, Jacob and Esau. And though they were twins, Esau emerged first, and Jacob followed, and as the story goes, he was clutching his older brother's heel, hence the name, heel grabber. By the way, that's who he was in life too, okay? Isaac's home, though he believed, was one of spiritual insensitivity and favoritism. It really hurt the home. Isaac knew, because he was told earlier, that the younger brother, Jacob, was to receive the promise. But he favored Esau, and he may, out of the flesh, have wanted to give it to Esau. Might have done it. Rebekah, his wife, favored Jacob, and she made sure that he would receive the promise, even if it meant through deception. So if Jacob and Rebekah, and maybe Isaac, had lived more by faith, they would have trusted God to fulfill his will and give Jacob the promise regardless of what they wanted. But they didn't. They didn't have that kind of faith. So they deceptively fooled Isaac, who was nearly blind or blind at that time, into blessing Jacob. Esau was the hunter, and he was in the field, and Jacob pretended to be Esau, and Isaac, though suspicious, finally blessed him. When Esau came in from the field and found out, he was very sad, dejected, and he went up to his father and he said, "Will you bless me also?" And Isaac blessed Esau. But the blessings are very different. It's clear that the promise went to Jacob, not Esau. And it could not be undone. It was binding. If Jacob and Rebekah had acted in faith, they would have precluded a lot of trouble. But despite all that, Jacob realized this was God's plan and he accepted it. So he says, yes, and he, that is Jacob, will be blessed. Now, none of this is mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11. We just have this rapid fire list of three men and their faith. But here's why we tell the story. Isaac's faith in the future promise that it would be fulfilled accepted fully what happened and how it happened. He believed it to be God's will. There are times in life where things just don't go the way we would like them to go, okay? You know, we had plans for our children, kind of. They chose the college they wanted to go to, and they went, and they all got their bachelor's degree, which we're very happy. Thank you. We're done with that one now. We can check that off. Maybe try to recover somehow financially. Allison is our oldest. Some of you know this story. And she's at college. She was going to be English as a second language. So she was either going to end up in the classroom or a factory somewhere, but she had a lot of Spanish behind her. She did very well in it. And even went down to Mexico for time for a summer just to learn how to speak it more fluently. And so she was taking her education courses. She had a little experience in the classroom, and she didn't like it. And so middle of her third semester, she called Alice. Alice was at a conference up in Minneapolis. She said, "Mom, I don't like education, and I'm not going to go into it." She didn't like the education books, she didn't like the classes, and she didn't like the classroom. Sorry for education, but that's just the way she is, okay? So what are you going to major in? She said, well, I'm going to do a joint venture, interdisciplinary thing called the theology and philosophy. She wanted ministry. She hasn't gotten there yet, but I imagine she will one day because that's Ben's dream also when they get out of the military. So it wasn't exactly the major we thought, and next came Lauren. And Lauren was going to be art education. And she was actually working more and taking more classes than she should. She was almost going to do a double major in studio art and then art education. And she came home for her wedding, so she had 1 year left, totally burned out because she was working in an after-school program teaching children art. She was a RA for 2.5 years. She was planning her wedding during that summer. And I heard her in the bedroom that night saying, I don't know if I want to go back to school. That's bad stewardship. We have paid for 3 years and you're not going back? No, you are going back. But we sat down and we reasoned together because I kind of hurt her feelings and I apologized up and down. And I said, well, do you enjoy after school? And she goes, no, not really, And I said, okay, so what can we do here? She said, well, I got a lot of studio art already. She said, how about if I just settle for studio art and look to the future for somehow I'm ever going to use it? And she is actually. She's thinking about a Master of Fine Arts and teaching part-time in a college, but then raising a family because that's her first love. In both of those cases, it didn't go as we thought it would go. And I can tell you that the only conclusion we could come to was this, that God has a plan for our children even if it isn't ours. And we firmly believed it. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, and that's the point. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. But one thing I learned from the book of Exodus was that God is our guide. And as he guided Israel, he's going to guide you and me and our children and our children's children's. And so we commit them to the Lord. And he has. He's proven himself very, very faithful. They each married great husbands who walk with the Lord. We love them. And their needs are being cared for. Ben and Allison, are in the military. Now over in Frankfurt, he's actually been raised, I'm going to brag a little bit, to be captain. But God has provided everything. When they get out, they'll eventually go into ministry, I think. And I told you what Lauren's desires are. Now, if you think our thinking is foolish and idealistic, then I will challenge you, and whether you think by faith or not. Because not all things that we do by faith are practical. We must believe that God is in all things and that he is guiding and leading us, providing and so forth. Because God may very well throw you a curveball. In fact, I know very few people who have not been thrown a curveball. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You'll have to cast yourself upon him and believe that he is going to provide a miracle and get you through to another season of life. Faith is the conviction of things unseen, the assurance of things hoped for. In one way or another, God will teach us that. Principle number 2, faith looks beyond human convention or what seems practical and natural. Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. These 2 sons would form 2 tribes in Israel and actually replace Reuben and Simeon. Jacob is an old man. He is also hard of seeing, in fact, practically blind. And Joseph wants him to bless both Ephraim and Manasseh, who have been born to him in Egypt. That's where Joseph spent most of his life after he was 17-year-old and traded into slavery there by his brothers. And Jacob said, fine. And so when Joseph brought his sons, he placed Manasseh, and I got to get this right, on Jacob's right, because the firstborn, Manasseh, would be blessed with the right hand. And then he placed Ephraim, the secondborn, on the left. And Ephraim, the secondborn, would be blessed with the left hand. And then when they were about to be blessed, Jacob changed hands. You remember when he crossed his hands? And Joseph objected, because this isn't tradition. This isn't conventional. This isn't the way we're supposed to do things. Culture tells us differently. Jacob didn't change his mind. And so the secondborn was blessed differently than the firstborn, and the secondborn would serve the firstborn. Now you think about that a little bit, because this is the way God has been working all the way through the patriarchs. It's always the younger being served by the older. Because God doesn't follow tradition in his ways. You have Isaac, the secondborn, who gets the promise over Ishmael, the firstborn. You have Jacob, born second, but he will rule over Esau. Joseph, and he probably got the double portion of the blessing like the oldest son would get. You know, he'd get 2/3 and the other would get 1/3 or whatever. Joseph probably got the double portion, and he was chosen over Reuben. And then you have here Ephraim over Manasseh. The elder serves the younger. Faith believes that God's ways are not man's ways. Like Jacob and Joseph, we also need to learn that lesson. We need to think sometimes beyond practicality and what is natural and what appears to be right, all in jest. But let me pick first on bean counters. And may God bless bean counters. Boy, do we need them, okay? But, as all of us, there's a hang-up. Things in life can be measured too often or decided on in terms of dollars and cents. And that cannot always be the case. In fact, many times it will not be the case. When you're in a fix and you can't get out of it, you're going to have to call upon the Lord for a miracle to provide a way out. I think about the gifts that we have given our children, and some of them were expensive. And you think about it even before you do it, going, oh boy, Christmas is really getting to be expensive. They're asking for guitars and lathes and, things of this sort. And you really don't have the money, and you go, well, if I buy this, will they continue on anyway? So Lauren wants an electric guitar, and she played it for a few years. Then she wanted an acoustic, and so, she's played it here and there. But I was thinking, wow, that's a lot of dough, because Connor gets a lathe. And, because he came home one day, and he was supposed to be a Little League practice. I said, what are you doing, skipping out of practice? He goes, no, Dad, I'm bad at baseball. He didn't use those exact words, but that's a paraphrase. And so we had to find something else for him. And he got right on it. I mean, he was into this. This was great. And then he wanted to turn larger objects, and so that meant a larger lathe. He had to buy a bandsaw, had to buy a drill press. He paid for the drill press out of his paper route money. And I found one. It came too early. I remember talking to my brother-in-law and saying, if you ever find an old Oliver for Connor, would you let me know? And he calls me in a month later. And I said, not this soon. I don't have the money, so you got to just take it out of savings. And it was only $700. You go, only $700? Yeah, that's cheap for a lathe, because they're like thousands of dollars. And so wood turning is not a cheap sport. We got it. He was thrilled to death. and then he didn't use it. Man, what do you want to do? You just want to clobber the guy, And kept prompting him, and well, he finally changed, and he's used it much. In fact, he even took his mini lathe up to Duluth. But there's things like that, where you blow money, and you wonder how you're going to recover. But it all kind of comes together in the end where you say, well, it's God's will, and even if it's been just 3, 4, 5 years that they've played the guitar or whatever, it's a part of their rounding out. We bought Allison a violin. She was playing violin in high school, and the next set of lessons was she would have to have her own violin. We didn't buy an expensive one, but it was $500. It's expensive enough. It was a nice old used one. And then she stopped playing the violin, or stopped taking lessons, let's put it that way. She didn't stop playing the violin, but she stopped taking lessons. I was going to play hardball. I said, hey, I'm not spending this kind of dough. She's a good woman, so she said, just back off, okay? Just back off. There are times like this. You consider the call to ministry. And by the way, the call, when it is truly from God, is undeniable. And if you hold off, God will nag you until you give in. Once a month, I go see Buddy McLeish, and I call them afternoons with Buddy. And we talk a lot because, see, Buddy and her husband were with InterVarsity almost from the ground floor up. Her husband, they lived in Toronto, was making good money. He was very good with money and banking and so forth, and he was very, very good with money. And one day, the guys from InterVarsity, Stacy Woods and a couple others, by the way, you ought to read about Stacy Woods. What a character and how God used him. Started, gosh, I'm getting way off. Oh, we don't have any time either, sorry. They started InterVarsity in Canada, came to the States, started it here, and in 1960 went over to Switzerland, started it over in Europe. Guy that was really used of the Lord. Anyway, and each step was a big step of faith. But her husband was asked if he would move down to Chicago with his family and basically be paid nothing. And he said yes. Yes. In fact, he didn't receive pay. He made sure that the staff was first getting paid. Interesting. And so she would tell me story after story of how these guys lived entirely by faith. I think about when Dallas Seminary was started. Louis Berry Chafer and a couple of professors, they all had their doctorates. They're all smart as a whip, and they start this seminary because they believed they should on hardly anything, going hardly with any pay at all. But God honored it. A guy named John Walvard was a student, graduated, was good with dollars and cents, and he got the school in the black. Listen, I know a guy who chose ministry over a very lucrative career. He would be worth millions right now, okay? Yeah, he left that lucrative of a career because he knew God was calling him into ministry, and he's never looked back. Now let me pick on perfectionists, okay? And by the way, I love perfectionists, okay? And so does God, and God bless perfectionists. But, and by the way, if you do want to get something done well, pick a perfectionist. It'll be perfect. But the downside is that they have a perfect plan for everything. Life is totally mapped out. Their schooling, their careers, their marriages, their children, their children's lives, and their careers. And then God says one day, surprise, it's not going to happen that way because I don't work according to convention. And they might freak out for a while, but they learn that God's ways are not our ways. I could go on and on and on. I love to tell those stories, but we got to get to the third point. Faith longs for home. Verse 22. Two of the patriarchs, Jacob and Joseph, asked that their bones be exhumed and carried to the promised land. They were so sure that the Exodus was going to occur that they said, now you better take my bones to the promised land. So Jacob's bones were dug up and carried, and he was buried in the cave of Machpelah with Abraham his father and Sarah his mother. That's that cave that Abraham bought as a prelude to the promise, that he believed so much in the promise that he bought a piece of land in the promised land. And Joseph would be buried in Shechem or Shechem. So, sure were they that it was going to happen, that they made Israel promise to do this. Egypt was their home. That was their home. But it was also not their home. Home was the land of promise. So faith looks for a home beyond here. I believe it was Joe Stoll, and I believe it was in Our Daily Bread, who told the story about he and his wife returning to see this old cottage that she had vacationed at in her childhood summers. I believe the grandparents owned it. And so you know how you want to go back and relive your life. I did it. I went back to Racine and I saw every old haunt. Everyone had to relive the past and get it past me. And so that's the kind of way she was. But she was disappointed, gravely disappointed, because it had, deteriorated. It was in disrepair. It wasn't anything as glorious as she remembered, at least in her mind. And so with the disappointment and everything, she realized one thing. I guess it's like home here. It's not really our home. There's another one coming. We're home, and we're really not. A friend of mine who has moved several times said to me, where's home? Where's home? I guess it's where I am now, but, where am I going to be next? Right. Where's home? I can tell you our story. It was wonderful to buy the home that we bought. We lived here in the village for 6 months, and then we moved in, and it was the greatest feeling on earth. I mean, it was September. Football season was beginning. We could hear the crowd cheer up out in the distance, and when they would get quiet, we knew it was halftime, and we'd go up there and to the game for free, because you could get in for free at halftime. But it was a great feeling. I mean, if you've ever bought a home, it's just like, wow, man, we're home. But then it wasn't, in a way, because we felt like we were camping out in somebody else's home, and so we had to start personalizing it. Only took 15 years, but, we bought wallpaper, and we bought rugs, and we bought furniture, and we put personal touches here and there, and it was fun. It was really, really fun until about the last 3 projects, and that wasn't very much fun. After 3 years of doing that, I woke up and realized, hey, this is home. That's how long it takes, to adjust. This is home. We integrated into the community through church, school, and Rotary, and then something unexpected happened. When the last child left for college, we felt a disconnect. You're nodding. You get it. Because you're no longer going up to the school events to see your children. Your children's friends are no longer coming over. Our house was packed with kids. And you don't go down to the homecoming parade and see your children anymore, in the band or on the floats. And so I felt a little less at home. Our neighbors moved away, and we were good friends. Roger across the street died, and we, again, felt a little more less at home. We felt kind of left behind. I mean, 510 Washington Street is home as much as home can be. We plan to stay and let the home be an anchor for our children and our grandchildren, because this is home. Connor doesn't even remember Rhinelander, even though he was 4 when he came down. It's a home to them and a place that they can always come to and call home. We've purchased burial plots with a plan to die here. That was the oddest experience. To go to we went to Fulton. We bought it before the price went up. They were $100 a plot, and they were going to go up to $150. So we bought when they were cheap. So I guess we just plan to stay, and home will be here, and our bones will lie in Fulton Cemetery. But as much as it is home, it's not. It'll never fulfill like heaven will. And I know that's a tough lesson to learn, still learning it. There is this thing in me that's letting me know it's not only here, but there in eternity. You build your dream home. After 3 years, you go, it's okay. But it wasn't as fulfilling as you thought it might be. Just let you know there's another home coming. Do you ever have days where you would welcome heaven if it happened? I have been told that Bob Anthony was preaching one day. He was the pastor that preceded me over there. And he said something to this effect: sometimes all I want to do is to go to heaven. And he did. And he's in a better place. Faith longs for that reality. It looks to the future and always gives us hope to endure what we must go through. It helps us to accept those things which seem impractical and unconventional. And it looks to a better place. Fourthly, faith looks to Christ and the finished work of Christ and receives it personally. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Amen.